Alright guys, TouchGuy back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome to episode 62 of the Breaking Point podcast. I'm back again here with Easymac. We've had a really crazy week of COD. Yes, we've still got this kind of mid-season break. Don't know what they're thinking there, but a lot to discuss. Roster trials out of nowhere have come into the discussion. Loads of talking points on ROKKR, the New York subliners. We've got all sorts of players on the bench back in the starting team. Also, the CDL confirmed what's going on with the Pro-AM Classic. The kind of talk about what the bracket is going to be, singular limb. We'll dive into that one. Also, the groups. What's the group of death? Plenty to dive into today. We are currently streaming live on Twitch and YouTube, which is beautiful stuff. So it should be available straight after the fact on YouTube, after the fact on all the other podcast platforms as well. But yeah, trying that one out. How's it going, Austin? You're back in business. I understand you've got some cats you're trying to take care of, but we've got a podcast to do, baby.
Doing good. Just made it back home from Easter, so ready to get the practice grind in for the Pro-Am and Major 3, because that's right up after that. So getting ready for both of that coming up.
Absolutely. Let's crack on. Let's do the Pro-Am first, just because this just got talked about very recently. I know we talked about the rumor last week as to kind of what the format was going to be. Thankfully, it's on LAN at the very least. They're doing it at one of these Belong Arena centers in Columbus. I think I saw some pictures of the venue. It looks like, it looks okay. It looks kind of cool. It looks pretty close, close together, right? I don't think there's going to be any fans, just because, there obviously kind of wasn't going to be, given the fact that they'd announced like no tickets or anything for ages. So I guess that was kind of inevitable. But frustrating, right? Because this tournament, and I know that Lion Man, I'm sure, be pretty passionate about this because he was confident, or he wanted this to be kind of like the premier tournament of the year, right? We've got the majors, got champs, but this, if anything, could have been the most exciting one. 12 pro teams, 4 amateur teams made it through. 4 groups of 4 CWL style, and yet there's 2 things that really let it down, I guess, one of which being the fact that there's no fans in attendance, the other which being that it's not a double in brackets. So quick thoughts on that whole situation. I saw Alex Rubens from LAG and the Guard was kind of frustrated that they've pretty much got rid of a entire major cycle they could have had, replaced it by this Warzone tournament that nobody cares about, and the Pro-Am Classic, which has not been done anywhere near as well as it could have been. So, look, it's okay. I'm excited to see it regardless. I think it's going to count as a proper event. It is a LAN. All the teams are there. It's going to count, but it's going to be a frustrating one because it could have been so much better, right? We wanted that old school CWL style vibe, which we almost got, and the players want, I'm sure, but they've fallen short of. So I like the idea. The execution, I think, leaves something to be desired.
Yeah, I'm very harsh on the Pro-Am, mostly because I don't want to seem like ungrateful, because they're listening and they finally adapted something that we've wanted for 3 years now, which is to have some events, at least like 1 or 2 a year, that have amateur teams incorporated into it, which is a good thing. It's very good. It's a change in the right direction, 100%. And I don't want to see them ungrateful for them doing that, but at the same time, it's like you just made it so close to being perfect, but then just like straight up handicapped yourself. The fact that I have a couple of issues. I don't really care that there's no fans or not. Obviously, they said they had a last-second schedule or venue change, which is understandable. Obviously there must have been some stuff going on where it was kind of hard to lock it in, which is why they haven't been advertising tickets by the sounds of that video, which is fine. For me, it comes from 2 different things. One, in the group stage, only 2 teams advance out of 4, right? Which doesn't sound bad. But in reality, you have to remember like tiebreakers and how they work. And we've already had a bunch of tie-breaking drama already because the tiebreakers aren't clear already.
Oh god, it's getting even worse than that, yeah.
And then now we're going back to a structure that everyone has actually hated in the past, because old COD champs used to have the same format where there was 14 pools, 2 teams get out. I'm okay with 14 pools if you use GSL format, which, that's fine. But when you do a round robin groups of 4, you can technically have 1 team go 0-3, and then 3 teams go 2-1. And one of those 2-1 teams doesn't make it out of the group, which reverse, you could actually have a team go 3-0 and 3 teams go 1-2, and one of those 1-2 teams get out. So imagine being that 2-1 team that gets knocked out, but the 1-2 team makes it pass, right? That sounds so dumb. Like it's just a bad format. You had to either pick GSL, which if you go that route, I'm fine, whatever.
They did that in
Make it,
Modern Warfare as well. You know, they
yeah,
did
which I'm
GSL.
fine. I'm fine with GSL. A lot of other esports use it. Valorant, CS, a lot of other first-person shooters use it. I'm fine with that. But you have to go that way if you're going to go to 14 groups with 2 teams advancing. You have to. You have to. Have to. Have to. There's like you shouldn't be comparing map unless you only do head-to-head, but you can't do that with 3 teams, and unless you do map count from the head-to-head or series count. But it gets so weird. But you can't do series count if there's an 0-3 team. So you go to map count, which is pretty dumb because not everyone's playing the same maps. It's different. So I don't know. I don't like it. That's my first issue. The second issue is why are you doing single limb? Why? What is the fascination with doing single limb right now in Call of Duty? We've had it in Modern Warfare. There was rumors of the original format having it. We have single limb and the kickoff and in the pro-am. Why are people fascinated with single limb? Like in other esports, when CS, for instance, when you have single limb in that, it's because they do best of 5s for that or best of 3s, which take 4 to 5 hours to play. We play a Call of Duty series in 1 hour. It's not the same on any level. It's really not. So like I don't understand why we're only doing single limb. I don't understand it. It ruins it. It literally puts an asterisk on the tournament like instantly. It's not even. It sucks because in reality, like the way I look at it is, I understand that the Wednesday and Thursdays, if you did double limb, you would probably need to do it from Wednesday to Sunday. If you do pool play on Wednesday and Thursday, and then you do the bracket on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I understand the Wednesday and Thursday probably won't do that good viewership wise, but when you go to dinner and you get an appetizer, entree, and dessert, you don't want the appetizer to be the best part of the meal. You want your entree and dessert. So like you have to build out the whole course. You can't just fucking skimp on one part of that. And so like having a bad pool play instantly ruins, like tarnishes the bracket, which is like the entree. And then by having it only single limb, you're making the entree suck. And like granted, yes, the finals, the dessert is going to be awesome either way, but like it just tarnishes so much of it when we were this close to actually having the best format we've had in 4 years. 4 years since we've had this 16 team format where there's 0 issues with buys, there's 0 issues with group play. You have a great tournament. We were so close to that. Like how it should be is your first and second in your group go straight to winners bracket. So at the end of it, four groups, you'll have 8 teams and winners. The third place teams should go straight to losers. By coming in third, you get 1 less life. The fourth place team should all be eliminated right away. You face last. So then you have 8 teams and winners, 4 teams and losers. The original, so technically you get rewarded for having good group play. You get punished for having a bad group play. And when you lose, you still drop down. You have another life. I don't understand why we're not doing that. I can't wrap. I want to know the logic because maybe there is some. Maybe they just can't have the venue that long. Maybe there's other things going into it. But I would almost rather have an online event with that format than have a watered down version of that. I don't know. It's just it makes me angry because we're so close. Like we've had a lot of progress this year. Like a ton. Like a lot of people don't realize we've actually had a lot of progress this year with format and everything else. But there's still, I just hope they realize there's still a ton of work we can do for next year. Ton of work. We should be starting the season earlier, having multiple kickoff preseason events before the actual season starts. We don't need 2 1-month breaks in the middle of the season. We should never be doing single limb ever again. Get it out of Call of Duty. And we should never be having only 2 maps for a third map game mode. Like I feel like that's really where we need to progress next year because it just drives me nuts that we're this close away from probably the best formatted Call of Duty event in 4 years, and then they just shot themselves in the foot. It makes me so upset.
It's sad. I agree with your first point as well about the groups because I used to be obviously nobody cared what I had to say back then because I was not existent. But back in like pre-CDL, we're talking, I guess Black Ops 4 counts as well, but especially World War II. I remember I was making this point a lot of how stupid the groups were and how annoying it was that, like, of course, OpTic got eliminated, and it was not like, I don't even think, I was definitely an OpTic fan when I first came into the scene, but at that point I wasn't. I just cared about the European teams. But even then, I thought it was kind of stupid that OpTic went 2-1 in their group, and yeah, they got 3-0 by EG, but like, they went 2-1, they lost one series, that event, to the team that ended up winning the tournament in EG, and that was enough to get them knocked out in groups in top 24, right? So that group format has always annoyed me when it's like literally it's just top 2 go through, bottom 2 don't, because the tiebreakers are atrocious. And they did that for years in COD. Like, it was always a frustration for me, the way they used to do champs. It kind of made sense just because, like, they wanted to go from 32 to 16. Whereas in this case, we start with 16. So surely we can keep some of those alive in the tourney, right? The singular limb thing to me is kind of the frustrating part, just because I agree about the asterisks in a way, because the kickoff this year, all 12 teams were there. To a degree, it's an event that people count and remember to a point, but the singular limb takes away something about it, right? I think it's not necessarily the format on the whole and the fact that it was so early, but like people would actually properly consider the kickoff an actual championship victory if it was double limb. And it's probably going to be the same for this pro-am, right? Like people will look back and, you know, all the teams are there. It should be a phenomenal format, but it's just the fact that singular limb will put, you know, there's going to be some sort of game 5 round 11 that goes down. Someone gets knocked out and you think, yeah, well, maybe that team could have won in another bracket. So just hope they realize, right? I agree. I think we've got to take some positives away from this. Like, it's cool. I'm super happy they're doing this. It's not something that I ever thought would actually happen. There's great storylines, right? Because we'll talk about the groups, actually. That's what we'll dive into now, what they look like. I don't know if you have them up on your screen, Austin. But there's really great storylines here. I mean, it's in the chat if you want to find it, if you don't have it.
Yeah.
Or it's on like CodeGamepedia's Twitter and stuff. Like Group D, for example, we've got Boston Breach, LA Gorillas, Paris Legion, and Ultra Academy NA, right? So we've got the best team from Challengers in the group with the worst team in the Pro League in Paris Legion, which is fantastic, right? We want to see, and there's a decent chance that they could do something in this group. Who knows? So just, I guess, thoughts on the groups. I mean, your group is pretty nasty, actually, because we've got, not only have we got Silly on Strike X and Fire 40 as well, baby. Let's go back in the league or back in a proper tournament. He, of course, well, Silly was part of the LAG team that broke your guys' win streak at the start of last year. You've also got Seattle Surge in your group, which was a bit of a bogey team. And then Toronto in there as well, who know how they're going to do, right? So, and if they get smoked, and if they get beaten by the Avatar team, then they might just blow it up completely. So, I don't know. But, yeah, the groups are looking spicy to me.
Yeah, I think the groups are pretty good. There are some easier groups than others. I think
How have they figured this out, actually? Like, why are some of the groups so stacked? I don't get that.
I think it's by standings. So I think it goes like first, second, third, fourth. I don't know who's fifth. I feel like Seattle's fifth right now.
LAG, I think, are fifth, just about.
Okay, so then it snakes. Then it must snake. So it must go.
Yeah.
We're 1, OpTic's 2, Seattle or London's 3, Boston's 4, and then LAG 5, LA Thieves 6. So technically, like our group is 1, 8, and 9, and then I think the last amateur team to qualify. So that's how they did that with the snake draft. I don't mind it. I really don't. That's the best way you probably could have done it without doing, because I don't like when they do the random draws. I'd rather it be structured on something. So yeah, since it's structured on that, I don't mind it. There's a lot of good storylines. So I'm actually kind of excited to see how some of these groups break down for the 2 teams that make it out. So should be interesting.
Yeah, agrees. I mean, like, what do we think's the easiest group then? Because I mean, if I look at Group C, it might be one of the most interesting ones to me, because we've got London, Los Angeles Thieves, New York Subliners, and Team War, which is the team of, is it Wardy, Maple, Weeman, and Denza, if I'm getting that correct, in Group C. So I think Team War, I guess, have picked up that squad. So that's interesting. Yeah, the format's been posted. It's live on, you can find it on, CDL Intel, COD League, Twitter, this type of stuff. So yeah, this is really interesting, because I think Ravens always have really interesting matches with both Thieves and New York. I always really like that London versus New York rivalry. I always think that's good fun. And there's a lot to prove for like all of these teams, right? Because London have to prove that they're not just trash on LAN. I guess they did come top 3 first, but they need to bounce back. New York, whatever the hell their roster's going to be, we'll dive into that in a second. And then Thieves need to show that their role change is actually going to work for them. So Group C, I think, is the one I'm keeping my eyes most firmly fixed on. I think Group B, I'm not going to say it's going to be a walk in the park for OpTic, but certainly on paper with Florida and Minnesota there, it doesn't feel like they've got it feels like they've got the easier end of the stick than you guys have, let's just say. But then again, who knows what Minnesota are going to turn up with to the event, right? Or what team they're going to be having. So yeah, just thoughts on what you think is kind of, because to me, the group of death is probably Group A, at least based on the potential of those teams. But I think that Group C is the most interesting one to me.
From top to bottom, I probably have to go with C, like for how close all 4 teams are. Like hardest group, I think our group's actually probably the hardest because I think Seattle and Toronto. If Toronto could win a hard point, they're going to be getting substantially better. Seattle is obviously Seattle. I think they're pretty much just a dark horse to win any tournament right now. I don't really know much on StrikeX. I know they weren't very highly seeded going into that amateur tournament, and they were like a shock to qualify. But on Group C, I actually think Denza's team is the best amateur team here by far. I think they're really, really good. They've been doing really good work in EU. I've watched them a lot. I think for how close all 4 teams are, I think that amateur team will be just as close to New York, LA Thieves, Ravens as like any other pro team is in their group. So I actually think that group is going to be really closely contested between all 4. Whereas some of these groups, you can kind of pick 2 or 3 teams that are going to be, in the running to qualify, which I think is cool. I think that's something to look forward to. I think that one has the most storylines as well. I don't have the weakest group, but I mean, obviously, I think A and C are pretty strong. Not to say like B and D can't go rogue, but I think right now I have 2 favorites in each of those that I kind of give the benefit of the doubt. Whereas in Group A and C, it could really be 3 or 4 teams that make it in there. So that's it. That is on the really positive side of the Pro-Am that there's so many storylines.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, cool. Before we talk role changes, roster changes, all this type of drama, quickly on Berlin Control, because the news a couple of days ago that the pros are testing Berlin Control, there's been some mixed feedback, as in, I think the pros generally think that it's viable. And I think Yassim even said he reckons it might be his favorite one, certainly better than Gavutu, up there with Tuscan, which is great to hear. I guess, there's some positives to take out of this after all. Obviously, it would be nice if we got a new hardpoint map. Like, when's the next map drop coming, Sledgehammer? Please. But still, maybe the break after Major 3 that we have for no reason is going to be the perfect time to put that one in. I guess we'll see. But yeah, thoughts on it? Because I think last night on the flank, there was a point from, I think Method said that maybe it's the B point or something. Like, let's say you're capping B and you get a wave of kills. You just you just have the setup to get the cap, which, is interesting. I honestly kind of thought this might not be a good comparison at all because the map was rather different, but when we were talking last year about raid control and whether that would be viable, I remember that was a big discussion about the B point as the fact that, okay, well, if you get the one wave of kills, you have like all the map control in the world to just trap them into the laundry spawn. But actually, as it worked out, it still ended up being very entertaining and the best control map in that game. Classic raid, isn't it? So yeah, thoughts on that from what you've seen so far in scrims?
Yeah, so we've actually been scrimming a lot just in case it comes in, even if it doesn't, because we have time to kind of, play around it. I personally think it's the best control map we're playing right now, for a variety of reasons. One, it is super interesting to watch. It plays, really identically to Raid, honestly, with how it's
unbelievable, isn't it?
It can feel like it's very offensive sided, but you can also get put in like mean traps. You know what I mean? Like on raid, sometimes you can get a clean break on water, push that out, capture that really easily, and then like the offensive round's yours. And a lot of times people are like, oh, this is offensive sided, but then you can get put in the trap really weirdly where defenses can kind of take over if they're aggressive. The reason why I like it the most is, I don't think this is a word, but the B point is the most capturable B point out of any map in control in this game. Which I think adds another layer of strategy to it, because right now, so to clear up some confusion originally too, this map was trialed at the beginning of the year, just like a lot of other maps were. The spawns for the attacking side were really up close, so you could get to the A point and capture it pretty much before the defenders even got there. So it just didn't work at all. And on one of the newest updates, I think we talked about it last week, they pushed back the attacker spawn, which made it so it's more of like Garrison in Black Ops 4, where you both get there at the same time, and there's kind of like that original bloodbath if the defenders and attackers both try to get it at the same time. I like that. There's actually a lot of strategy right now of how fast you give away A. Like on Tuscan right now, if the team has full control of A, you're not going to keep throwing lives at it. You're just going to let them capture that and then defend B. Whereas on that map, you really got to fight for every tick. And I like that. Again, it's more strategy, it's more thought process, it's more teamwork, because it reminds me of CTF, where you have to spawn up and make an instant decision with your team and make the correct call, which that is what makes Control one of the highest teamwork game modes in Call of Duty, when it actually has, one, goes by ticks, and two, has good maps. It's just like the same thing as CTF for me. Like if Control has great maps and by ticks, it is the most teamwork oriented game in Call of Duty. I think it's really up there. I would fight that battle on pretty much any of it. But so you can't just give up free ticks on A. And as Zinni said, yes, on B, think about it in hardpoint. You know, when you're set up in there, it's very hard to break, which I don't think that's a bad thing for attackers, because just like if you're attackers and when you're trying to break into it, it's hard. For the defenders, it's easy to hold down too, but you can make mistakes and then allow that team to capture. But you're not going to see a lot of like this. I don't know. You're going to see a lot of like slugfest, like really aggressive gameplay. It is going to be attacking sided. So I think it's I think it's very interesting to watch.
Gives attack a chance, huh?
I know it's only been like a week and a half too. It could flip, but my first impressions are this is up there with like the best control map we have. I think you're gonna see a lot of Tuscan in Berlin. I don't mind Gavutu. Gavutu has been changing a lot recently to where it's probably more around like 35% win percentage on attacking, which is good. I like that as well.
Bold.
It's starting to change meta. And you know, I think Control, we're reaching a point right now where a lot of just fundamentals on it are changing. You're going to see a lot different gameplay. At least I hope. You know, that's just my theory going into this next Pro-Am in Major 3, that you're going to start seeing a different style of play coming out of a lot of teams. You're not going to see more of the okay, they got A, we can just defend B, we can just be fine with that. So I don't know. With the change from ticks to kills, it took a while to kind of transfer over because there wasn't a lot of practice before that. But now that teams are having a lot of practice, you're starting to see more strategy, which again is what makes Control good. We just need that to progress and get better and better, just as it did last year. By the end of the year, it was a great game mode. So I have a feeling it's going to get there. We just need probably like one more map, like one or two more maps that come in season, whatever season is after Major 3.
Only kind of soon, like 27th. I think people said in the chat that we're going to get the next map drop. So
if we get one or two good maps that we can, one, have one more hardpoint, one more S&D, and you know play around with what are the actual 3 best controls, we are really going to be in a good spot towards the end of the year. But we need them to really put 2 good maps in for this next season. We really need that.
With any luck, all I know is that last year Simp was like the best raid control player in the game. So we'll see if any of that transfers over here to Berlin, if it is rather similar. Let's talk Thieves, because we've got some role changes, we've got some roster changes, but LA Thieves confirmed a few days ago that yes, Kenny will be going to the SMG for the first time in a rather long time, since the World War II days effect, or I guess since the start of Black Ops 4 really, when didn't work out too well, but the Sorg wasn't particularly good. So Kenny's basically said, look, fine, I'll do it myself. Now, there's a lot actually to come from this, because now there's pressure on both Kenny and Drazah to turn up, because I looked at the Lion cards and there was nothing worse on the eye than the 57, 56 that both of those guys had respectively. That was pretty brutal. So they've got to turn it around individually. Personally, I think that Drazah on the flex is where he's best suited. I want to see if Kenny can do it on the sub, because we haven't seen it in a long time. We've heard all sorts of pros and people saying that Kenny should have done this a long time ago, and it does seem to suit him well. It's a similar gun to the PPSH, let's just say. Whether he can actually speed up and make it work as he needs to, because I'm personally not convinced that the Envoy Kenny SMG duo is going to be all that dissimilar from the Envoy Scump SMG duo from last season. That just did not have what it takes in terms of, if anything, aggression and coherence, if you know what I mean. Like last season, if you watched OpTic versus FaZe, Simp and Abees are just on top of each other the whole time, and Scump and Envoy are doing different things. I wonder if we'll see the same thing here for Thieves. So I personally don't think this is enough to turn the team around. I don't think this is enough to get the team to being a top 3 team consistently. I think it can move them up the ladder. I think they can show some improvements. They certainly seem to be I guess they were thinking, look, there's no real upgrades available, so let's try this out, and if it doesn't work, let's officially blow it up after that. But yeah, there's a few reasons why they think this will work. Octane said that he believes it has made them better, but he also made clear that they're still getting wrecked by you guys and OpTic whenever they play them. So, there's good and the bad.
Yeah, I mean, I respect that he's honest with that. A lot of pro players will just say like it's going good. He pretty much said like we're beating the teams we should beat, but still losing to us in Texas, which is fine. At a new roster switch, new role switch, you're not expected to beat the best teams. You're expected to work your way up from that. And I think consistently beating the teams below you is a progression to where they were before. So I think that's fine. Starting with Drazah on the flex, I have always thought going back to last year that when Kenny and him were on the ARs, Kenny played that aggro AR role and he played that slower AR role, even though he was the flex. Like he was the slower AR that was the flex, and then Kenny was just the faster AR, which I thought worked out pretty well. I thought that worked out really well. I'm interested to see how that works out with Octane, who is also a slower AR, and then you have Kenny, who honestly I feel like he's a wild card for how his SMG is going to be. I mean, I think I've been pretty vocal. I think he's a better AR, but it doesn't mean I don't think he's a bad SMG. I just haven't seen him play that consistently the last couple of years, and I'm kind of interested to see how that comes out. Yeah, so I think it could be good. They're gonna need a lot of pacing changes to make that work. I guess you're gonna probably need either one of Drazah or Octane to be one of that more aggro AR. I would like Kenny and Envoy to do really well together. I think you can still have Envoy taking like the routes if the faster AR sticks around with Kenny a lot and like plays hand in hand with him, that's how you pick up when you don't have your SMGs playing together. Is you have your flex play with one of your SMGs a lot more, holding hands that way. And I feel like that can work if that's what Drazah's role is going to be. So yeah, I don't hate it. I want to see how it plays out in matches. Like obviously I've seen some scrims, but I want to see how it plays out in matches because obviously I don't know how their tournament vibes and communications are going to be, and also their S&D. So there's a lot I want to see. I'm happy they're making a change and thinking about what can work for them in the future. So yeah, props to them for trying to get creative with the solution, and hopefully it works out for them.
Yeah, the other thing that was talked about here was like the comms, as you kind of mentioned a little bit, just because I was again I respect and I very much appreciate from a content perspective the kind of honesty and openness from LA Thieves, not just as players but also as the team, because they put out the 0 to 100, I guess is how it's meant to be pronounced, episode, and there was a couple of moments where Kenny was very visibly frustrated after their games with the comms from Drazah especially and Envoy also, kind of the indecisiveness of what they wanted to do, as in, do something, tell us what to do. I think the example that really comes to mind for me was I guess it was the first match of stage 2, or I guess the major 2 qualifiers as they're called now, where OpTic played Thieves and it went game 5 round 11, and there was a trade over towards the kind of P1 side of the map. It was a 3v3 and the bomb was down. Envoy had died, I think, and he got traded out. 3 guys left alive. The Thieves guys just stood there, did nothing for like 50 seconds. And Shotzi was like, hey, look, we're going to push through B. We're going to make a play. We're going to get behind them. I'm going to go top fire. And Shotzi said after the fact he called the shots. He was like, this is what we're going to do. I'm the SMG. I'm going first. I'll make the space. You guys trade. And if you're still alive, then you can make the calls from then on. They make a play. Thieves don't make a play. OpTic win the round. It plays out exactly as Shotzi kind of, I guess, had it in his head. Now, that's something that Shotzi obviously brings to the table. Kenny doesn't seem to think that they had that on their SMGs, and Octane kind of echoed the similar opinions that he said that effectively Kenny and Sam, Octane's comms, are far better than Envoy and Drazah's, to the point where they thought that, okay, putting Kenny on the SMG gives them that balance, and it means that those guys who are in the mix of things can actually comm and be more decisive, with Kenny doing that role as well. So I thought it was quite interesting, because if that's a problem now, then it's not necessarily going to go away, if you know what I mean. Like, if the comms aren't great and there's indecisiveness, putting Drazah to a flex and Kenny to a sub and Envoy's still there is not necessarily going to fix that, right? It does also make you question, when you look back at OpTic Chicago last season, Like, because people talked about Envoy's ability as like an IGL type thing. And I think he maybe made this clear as well that he made some calls in search, like he was often doing that. But I think in the respawns, it was generally Formal that was taking charge of the comms. So I think maybe we've kind of seen that not necessarily that element of his gameplay is overrated, but that they need to seriously think about how you work around that. And doesn't seem like an ideal case scenario to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to hear them talk about that. That's one thing I like about Kenny is he's very open with like his criticisms, what he's thinking, pretty much everything, and I like that. He's not really like a bullshitter. He just kind of cuts it and says it how it is. And obviously, 100 Thieves make a really good doc. They show behind the scenes a lot. So um, I like what he was saying. He obviously has a really good point. That's something where I've said that in the past too, that you pretty much need one SMG and one AR. You need the SMG to kind of call what they're saying in the front lines, and then the AR to kind of move around the chess pieces and say what lanes need to be open and shut. Um, that's something where you're seeing a lot of like IGLs this year be really important to getting their whole teams cohesive and doing stuff together and not being so fractured. That's something like LAG did really, really well this past tournament. So if Kenny can bring that kind of structure on the front line and kind of help, you were saying Octane is very vocal on the back, and if those two can connect and kind of mold the macro philosophy they're trying to do on the map, then I actually like that move. I think that could work out very well. I did like the reasonings for why they said they made that move, and that's what makes me believe that it can work. And if it does, I think that's one of the major reasons why like communications is so very important this year with the low TT, the low time to kill. You need to be working as a unit, team shots, being able to trade each other, not just dying with no trade and leaving your teammates out to dry. Like all those stuff's very important to beating teams this year. Like that's where the skill gap is this year. Not so much on the individual level, but more on the team level and how you're playing together as a unit. So if this move improves team chemistry, then I'm all for it.
Let's talk roster trials, baby, because some teams have taken it a step further. Minnesota seem to have kind of introduced the idea effectively, not really introduced it, as in it's been seen in other esports, let's just say. That's kind of one thing that when I was getting into Valorant about 6 months ago or so to start up the other channel over there, I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting because a lot of these teams won't just make a change. They'll trial a player, see if it works. If it doesn't, we won't sign him, this type of stuff. Of course, COD has kind of not been like that because it's been very much player led and it still is to this day, obviously, but in other esports, there's more of like the general manager seems to do more effectively and make some of the calls on who's going to play with who and what they think is going to work as opposed to what the players think, because the players aren't always going to know best. But that's the thing. Sometimes the players will think, hey, this guy's going to be a great fit. Let's get him in for this guy because he's been playing bad. And the team's going to be great. And then it turns out team isn't great. And then unlucky, you've just paid all this cash. So therefore what they thought, let's do roster trials. We have the time to do it. The team obviously is underperforming. Their game one record is like 1 in 14 or something atrocious. Hardpoint is awful. We've got to change something up. The SMG line isn't really performing. Attach has been the only good player, like solid player, of course, I guess. Rumor has it right now in these trials that Attach is pretty much the only one to be there in every single trial. Everyone else has been swapped around, and that does also make you wonder about Clayster, right? Whether that's a possibility. What do you think about these team trials? Before we just talk about what the teams might be doing, because there's been some back and forth on it, right? Whether it's a good idea, is this good for the players? Is it going to mess up the team chemistry at all? Is it going to like light a fire under these guys to make sure they know that their spot is not safe? To me, I think from a content perspective, I actually love this because there's all sorts of questions. And I think you've lost a cat again. But if you haven't, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to me that the two teams that did this are Valorant teams as well. Trialing and seeing how pieces work together is very prominent in Valorant right now before somebody like pulls the trigger on making a roster. And for everyone that doesn't know, Minnesota is V1, who was an NA Valorant team who is very, very good, who is actually in discussions to get Wardell right now. And then New York is Anbox, who also has an NA Valorant team. So it's kind of interesting
No
that
longer
those.
called Ambox. They changed that. Weird.
Yeah, it's like it's
NYFU, they're called now.
NYFU. Yeah, forgot
Yeah.
about that. But yeah. So those are two Valorant teams. I have a feeling they kind of took the same philosophy for that. And we've kind of actually talked about when you make a roster change, the chances are that the player that got benched comes back is very low. If it's a star player, for instance. So I think trialing gives you a way to semi-bench or light a fire under that player while also seeing how other pieces that are out there fit in your roster. And right now, while we have this break, this does give a perfect opportunity for you to still scrim pro teams, see how different pieces fit within your roster, and then go from there. I don't hate it. It's interesting to see who has been kind of like taking a break on some of these scrims and who's been playing. I think it's a very good idea. I think it's only going to do well for these teams because the two teams that are doing this are in danger of not making playoffs at the end of the year. So yeah, it could work out pretty well. I bet you I can probably say one of these teams that does do this trial. I bet you one of them will make champs and get a boost in stage 3 and 4. So yeah, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all actually.
Yeah, it's cool, I think. And okay, so this is what Minnesota are planning. The rumor has it that Havoc is the one in big consideration right here. Now, whether exactly how he fits in is a bit of a question mark, but we can maybe read between the lines here a little bit, chat, to try and figure out what they're planning to do. So I believe I saw a clip where Zuma said that they're trying Havoc in instead of kind of Priester or Standy, kind of switching it up, trying both of those SMG pairings. To me, the Standy Havoc combo seems to have more potential because I personally think Priester is better on a flex. That's my opinion. But still, who knows what they're going to do there? The other thing to me is the clayster question, which to me is the most exciting question of this whole thing, is because Clay said on Twitter, shout out Kiosku in the chat, by the way, agreeing with my points on some things, so I appreciate it. But he was saying just a couple of days ago that in terms of buyout, that's a big discussion that there's been that, Clayster's too expensive, right? His contract's massive. He said that what they could do is effectively, because his contract runs out at the end of this year, is come to a loan arrangement where he would be loaned to that team for a period of time, as was the case with Priester and Crowder from FaZe to 100 Thieves back in the Black Ops 4 days, where the Minnesota team, in theory, could pick up his salary but not have to worry about a buyout for the rest of the year. And then he's a free agent anyway if they wanted to continue with him. Just because Attach is there, probably a safe player. Clayster wants a trial, and I think probably has got a trial because he's been talking about it. He's either got a trial with New York or he has with Minnesota, one of the two, maybe both. And Clayster and Attach, we know the history there. So, I don't think it's out of the question that Clay and Attach think, you know what, maybe we should run it back. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I just wonder what they'll come up with here because it just takes one good scrim set with one player in your team and the vibes to be much better than they have been. And all of a sudden, as the coach, you're thinking, okay, wow, that's potentially a good piece, whatever the rest we do. So it creates a lot of interesting questions for these guys internally because I think they've been trialing all sorts of stuff the last few days and they've got to figure out what works, which isn't easy. So, what do you think? What do you think they'll do?
Yeah, so what were the two changes that Zuma was saying? He was saying Havoc was trialing with Minnesota in who was the New York one?
Kismet and
Kismet? Yeah.
General rumors.
Kismet in general. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So on both sides, I actually don't mind either one of those. I actually think the Preston and Havoc would actually work really, really well over the Standy and Havoc. I think Priesta I think personally I think he's a better SMG when he has confidence in the team and to play the kind of game that he wants because he's one of those guys where just as we talked about with Kenny, Preston's very vocal and when he's on the front line and he can kind of mold the game plan to kind of where he wants it to be and he can lead the team from the front. He's elite at that. He's very, very good at that. That's one of the reasons why he fits so well into that 100 Thieves team. And I think if Havoc's there, that makes Havoc is very good with his routes, and that's something I think like Standy's been kind of doing bad at this year and kind of getting exposed. Like at times he gets exposed for is kind of his route taking and decision making can be questionable at times, but his individual skill is really high, which brings in this whole debate on individual success and team success. A lot of players can find that individual success, but they don't work inside of a team and find that team success. And sometimes even a very skilled individual player can be switched off of a roster, and that team will find more success because they have more cohesion or chemistry within the team. That's why I think it might work with a Havoc and Preston. I don't hate that. I think what Mike brings S&D wise is extremely valuable. I think Havoc is one of the best players in the elite in S&D. I think they would be one of the best S&D teams, period. And if they could just get good at one of the other two or either hard point or control, they could be competing in the take series. So I think that switch makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. On the New York side, I did think it was kind of interesting. I did see Crim say that him and HyDra weren't practicing, which I
Day
guess
one, they both weren't in there. Then I think yesterday, Crim still wasn't playing, but Hydra's probably back. And then I think today, Crim's back. So,
yeah.
current update.
So I think they're trying to gauge, like, on the communication side and team chemistry side, like which one fits better. Out of I'm guessing they're probably trialing between 4 players, so they probably did the 2 new players, one new player, and then without them to see where they're kind of at. Again, I don't hate it. I think it was kind of I don't know where Neptune is in this. I know Neptune kind of had the hot hand at the end of the last stage, so maybe he saved his spot that way. It is interesting that they're scrimming without HyDra. I know communication is always going to be an issue within the team environment there, but as the same thing as Standy, he's very individually talented, but like who knows if team chemistry changes without him in there. I think he's probably a shoe-in though for that roster. I think it's probably gonna be like what Paul and I guess Neptune sounds pretty safe, and then HyDra, and then I honestly I thought they were in a good place before that. Again, I don't think Crim's playing that bad. I thought he was playing pretty well. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I got to respect at least trialing to see if they can do something better because they're in 11th place and doing good, but then bombing out of the major in last place isn't good enough. They got to start finding points somewhere, and the pro-am doesn't give you any points, so stage 3 is really your goal to improve and get better at. So both of those teams, again, making pretty smart decisions when you look at their strengths and weaknesses. I'm sure that will work out for them in the long run because again, they're not benching somebody. So like by doing this, they're just trying to gauge where their weaknesses are and where they can improve if they don't do good at the pro-am. I'm guessing like if they do stick at either of these teams and they do really bad at the pro-am, that's when they'll be like, okay, we just did these trials, we know this works, we're gonna make the play. So who knows if it works? Again, I probably think New York will probably stay as it is. I really don't see them changing much in that roster. For the Minnesota side, again, I honestly wouldn't hate Colt and Preston as an SMG duo, and then giving Mike and Dylan, or Major and Attach the AI role, and then I can see that going into the pro-am, seeing how that works, and then being kind of cutthroat the rest of the season, seeing if changes need to be made, like they need to be made. So that's where I would be at as like a GM.
Yeah, the New York one is the most interesting one to me. There's so much to talk about here, really, because I think the idea of doing these trials is, well, it's interesting, right? Because Crim said effectively, at least on day 1, where him and HyDra weren't in the trials, that Dareal, their coach, like he didn't, like this wouldn't have been his idea, to do this. So it seems kind of that the management in New York have seen what Minnesota had done, thought that might be a good idea. We just come top 12, let's give it a go. And they might be right, to be honest. The question is, like, you don't really, if the team was clicking, then you wouldn't necessarily do this, right? And I think that regardless of how the team looked and improved, whenever you come top 12 and you're like 11th in the league, regardless of the circumstances and the consequences and the fact that you played FaZe and all this and like you were close to beating Thieves and probably should have done. Thieves still only placed top 8, right? So like it's not like you lost to a team that won the event or something. So I think in any of those situations, you have to consider changes. The changes they made were very interesting, though. Leaving HyDra and Crim out day 1, to me, the 2 most crucial pieces to this team. If you want a team to win, you need a superstar and you need at least one winner, to be honest.
Well, you need communication. communication is
Comms obviously is good.
I think it's more important than both of those. I think you can win in this game without a superstar. I mean, we just saw that with no disrespect to LAG, but going into that tournament, I guarantee you, no one thought any four of those players were like, you could argue maybe one or two of them were in the top 10 conversation. But you didn't really have any standout superstars there. What you had was perfect team communication, perfect synergy, and that's on a pickup team. So that is where the whole skill gap is this year. That is it's I don't know. That's where my head's at. So
I do agree, but I also think that okay, yeah, I agree. If you want to get consistent results, then communication over skill is preferred. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to win events as New York, you've got to have HyDra in your team. That's just the way it is. You have to try and make it work because, I mean, maybe you disagree, but I think that there's no way. Like, I think Los Angeles Guerrillas have more talent than people give them credit for, to be perfectly honest.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you've got Hook, you've got Slasher,
yeah.
like, Spart was unreal, and then Asim's playing out of his mind this year. So I think that it's not like they definitely have superstar level players that maybe weren't playing at superstar level until this tournament. If you're New York, I just don't think there's a world in which the team somehow they might get better. Like, let's say Crim and HyDra are gone and they have like Kismet General, which was the rumor, plus Porlex and like Neptune or something. Let's say their communication is phenomenal, right? Let's just say it is. They're still a top 6 team at best with great comms. I don't think they're winning an event, to be honest. I think you need players that can bring you to the next level, that can, you know, have that factor that Crim is going to bring to the rest of the team at a finals, like when he's done it so many times before. Like, Crim has been a good player this year as well. So to me, I think that's the thing. I don't mind the idea of trialing without HyDra and Crim, just to kind of see what the team is like without them, right? Maybe it's a good idea just to see. I think that's the point that Parasite was making. Like, look, let's just leave Crim out for a day and how are the comms? Is he crucial to the comms? Yeah. If he's not here, can we still operate? Like, you know, how are we feeling? Is it actually a more fun team environment, right? Like, you've got to think about these things, which I think is quite interesting. And leaving HyDra out maybe for the same reasons, but I can't really see a world in which, as effectively their prized assets, HyDra finds himself on the bench. Because I feel like if this team wants to be a contender, they have to make it work around HyDra. And Crim, I thought, would be a good piece around that. But maybe they think that with Porlex maybe certainly earning his spot lately, and Neptune also being good, it's tough to know what you do, right? And I'm not sure Kismet is an upgrade, and they might be trialing some other things. It's tough to say.
Yeah. Well, like, you got to look at it. So, like, first off, we really haven't had a lot of GMs in the past history in Call of Duty. That is obviously more prevalent now with franchising. The GM's job is to make roster decisions. It's not really on the head coach. It feels like the tides are changing in that regard, where there's gonna be more power now in the future in GMs. Like, that's literally their position, is to do that. So that's why I wasn't too surprised when I read D-Real didn't okay that. It was more of management. And again, I'll repeat, like, both of these orgs are more they have Valorant teams who have been trialing and doing this now for over a year and a half. And when you look at who's coming in and who's, like, for somebody to get dropped, I do agree, you have to look at who's coming in and whether that's an upgrade or not. And, like, obviously that's going to be a whole conversation. But at the same time, the way they structure their trials, I don't hate it, because it can show how much does this person bring in terms of value for communication and stuff, or how much are they a detriment in terms of communication and teamwork, and you can kind of see where that lays. Again, I kind of agree. Like, you got to look at ceiling, but you also have to look at consistency. Like, if you're consistently losing to the best teams and 50-50 versus the midfield, but then beating the bad teams, like, is that a success? Is that a team you want? You know, I would be very upset with that. And that's kind of where this New York team has been sitting now for 3 years. So I'm sure they're kind of
isn't that really?
Yeah, they need to. They're kind of expecting to be a better team than that, and that's where, like, again, this year communication is so crucial, and being able to set up plays. Like, I'm sliding now. Okay, breaking door. I'm behind you. If we can trade 2 or 3 guys here, like, that's what's crucial. Go back and watch LAG versus us on Tuscan Hardpoint in the grand finals, and you will see communication in this game is how you beat higher skilled teams. And if your communication is lacking, you will never beat the top teams consistently. You won't even touch them. You won't. This is a simple fact. And if a team thinks their communication's not there, they're going to be switching and prodding, because there is a lot of, again, the talent between the best player and the worst player. I mean, it's not huge. Like, the worst player, the best amateur players can come in and, drop big kills here or there. It's all about consistency and teamwork and synergy. But the biggest gap right now is honestly communication, setting up for each other, finding that pacing, so that grouping, so you're not getting two-pieced like instantly, but you're able to trade off of each other and make spawns and make everything easier for other players around you. That's the thing. You have to balance individual success with team success, and some players do that very well, and some kind of struggle with it. Um, you're seeing, I'm not going to name drop anyone, but you've seen players in the past struggle with that and then change it and do better. It's a growing process. Usually the more experience you get within the league, you get better at that. And that's how you progress as a player. It's not so much as a skill level, like you're still going to shoot straight, but positioning, working with teammates, communication, knowing how to set up micro plays in the map, like how to make a perfect slide, and then allowing your teammate to be that bait right behind you. That's where the skill gap is, and that's where, that's why some of these changes, again, they might, you hear HyDra and Crim are sitting out. You're hearing Standy, Preston, and everybody else are sitting out, and there's a big name players. And I think the reasoning for that, you can't just look at one for one gun skill or individual success. You got to look at how the team works together with the set pieces coming in, and that's where it's hard, because again, we're not in that camp. We can't see everything on a day-to-day level. Like, this can be completely wrong, but like that's where it's tough. That's where you kind of have to gauge it from the outside, and that's almost impossible to do. But yeah, that's kind of what I see just based off of these like changes.
What do we think about the Gunless situation? Because it was confirmed last night that LAG are continuing down their current path and they're going to keep Spart in the team as expected, right? I think they even said on the flank kind of that, like, if they'd have come second or third, they probably would have brought him back. But as it is now, especially with Gunless not being at, I think, 100% health, I think that he's got surgery scheduled soon, but I think he's confident that he's going to be all okay and it should go fine. So that's a positive, of course. But there's lots of questions about Gunless, because Bevel's made a quite interesting comment on Twitter about this being now a very powerful 5-man lineup, kind of implying that they want Gunless to be part of their future team plans. And you do have to wonder whether this team's just won. Quite often what can happen when a team wins is that when they don't win again, they're like, well, we got to change something to get back to the top, effectively, which may or may not be true, especially because the whole Volk thing, let's say Spart doesn't come out and just fry from now on with the auto or whatever else he's using, the MP40 on Bacage probably. There's going to be a question in the back of their minds, like, maybe Gunless is a better fit without the Volk in the meta, right? It's a consideration. So for those reasons, and maybe because Gunless isn't fully fit and ready to go to another team yet, he's probably going to stay there for a little bit of time. The 5-man lineup thing was interesting to me just because it almost implied there's a world in which Spart is a phenomenal search and destroy player, right? Crucial to them getting their 10 S&D win streak. But in fairness, their hardpoint and control, wasn't great. Left something to be desired, 50-50 pretty much. Their control in the finals was particularly great on Gavutu, and the hardpoint was good and everything, but not that they were a dominant team. If anything, they looked, better with Gunless in the respawns than they did with Spart. So, is there a world in which they put Gunless in for the respawn, Spart in for the searches? It's unlikely, but given that they have chemistry with both players now, it's something that they might even consider, given that they don't want to do Gunless dirty, I guess, because I guess he feels, and probably they feel, like he's been harshly done by in this situation. The other part of it is, of course, other teams could be hitting up LAG saying, look, we've potentially got a move to be made here. Like, who knows what the teams decide to do? I don't know how many moves there really are for a flex player in this market right now. It's tough to see many, but again, it would be tough to see Gunless effectively have to sit out the year on the bench again, because we've seen we've seen that before, and it's been, it happened in Modern Warfare, I guess, right? Because he didn't get him back into the Huntsman or anything, did he? And so it was just kind of sad when a player like that gets into that position. So yeah, intrigued to your perspective really on, I think LG have made the right move. I think it's a no-brainer what they've done, but the Gunless question is probably the most interesting one to me right now that's outstanding in the league.
Yeah, I thought as soon as they made it into that Sunday, it kind of sealed it, where again, they were a pickup team. Like, I actually just did an interview with Spart that should be coming out soon. We kind of talked about that. He came in with one practice under their belt, and they didn't play any S&D. and they came in
Wow.
and did that well. And he kind of talked to me about like his confidence. He's very confident player. He said almost like it doesn't make sense how confident he is, like where he shouldn't be as confident, but he's still that way. And I think that's very important as a player. But like the biggest thing I thought he brought to the team was pacing. I thought his pace, where we just talked about it, he is that flex player that can keep up with the second SMG and kind of be that man to allow ASIM or Hook to go off and make their own plays, and you can kind of stick with each other still and trade and be effective that way. And I thought that pacing made their team synergy and play just go crazy. Like they were playing very well together. They were all playing off of each other perfectly. But it's still like we had our questions about their map pool. Like they had one good hard point in terms of record, which was Berlin, and they had Gavutu, but they weren't as strong in Tuscan. And their S&D was really strong. So that was like our thing. Like they have to improve and expand their map pool the next month. Like that's obviously very important to them. They know that. Because it's very easy to kind of lose focus on S&D and digress there. So it's easy. It's really important on building your map pool out and to maintain that level. On the gunless side, like it's tough. I love Pierce as a player. Like and you know I know him very well. I think he's very good. I think he's had a great year so far. And I really think there should be a lot of interest for him. I hope he is a lot better soon. I hate to see someone get sick and lose a roster spot due to that. It sucks. But I do hope he gets better because he is. Like, I thought he was hitting good form. This LEG team did look a lot better in stage two like the stage two qualifiers going into it. So I can see him plugging into a couple different teams. It's just, when will he be at 100%, able to practice every day? And when he hits that level, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversations because, Alex Rubens is the GM over there. He's a good guy. He will make a move to, do good by Gunless. So I do expect him to see him in the CDL soon, and I do hope he's healing up, or I think he said he had to have surgery. So I hope that gets better for him in the future, real soon, and we'll see him quick because again, he's one of the best flex players, and I think he comes in pretty quickly for someone.
Yeah, on his day, one of the most entertaining players in the game, no doubt. One of the most exciting of the last few years. Let's talk before we rank the flex players, which we are going to do, because we're going to rank them as they have been so far this season, but also consider a couple of flex players that are now going to be flex players going forwards and where they might end up. At least talk about that possibility. There was some talk from the OpTic guys about the CDL format and how the events are laid out. As in, Hex has talked about this for quite some time, and Illy apparently said to Hex that it's like the only bad thing of playing for OpTic, is that they designed the schedule so that OpTic play last so that you get the most viewership for the day. It's a sensible business move, right, from the CDL. They want to maximize viewership. If they put OpTic first game of the day, people tune out after they play. It makes sense. But it also does have implications for OpTic, as in they're always playing last. It's difficult to predict when you play if you're playing last, because there's a few series before you could be playing much earlier or like 2 hours later if the series go longer than you think. So it might be difficult to get good practice in. There's also other days where, I don't think it was necessarily the case this tournament, but it probably has been the case that they have OpTic opening the show and then closing the show. So they have OpTic playing the first game, and then if they go on to win that or whatever, then they'll play another game that is scheduled late in the day. And that's probably just how the scheduling works. At least for this event, that's pretty much just how it was going to be anyway, regardless of the team. But, I think it's definitely something that you see. If you did some statistical analysis on where the teams average play, I'm sure you'd see that there's some bias there in favor of OpTic being last or whatever, which isn't perfectly aligned to competitive integrity, right? What do you think? Is it actually a big deal? I know that it's a thing that they've talked about for quite a lot. Like, should the CDL or esports engine, whoever's making these calls, think about this? Or at the end of the day, is it just one of these things you've got to deal with as a team in a professional league, and they can kind of call the shots of what they think is going to get the most viewership? At the end of the day, you've got to think in that way first. Maybe as a kind of part of one of the teams, you might have a different perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, you got to look at it from a business perspective as well. Like in the past, these guys were businesses. They wanted to keep their stream numbers high throughout the day. It made sense That's why I do like the set schedules now. There's no like hand picking anything. It's pretty much, the losers bracket round 2 is here. Like that is just whoever it is, whether that's, a more unpopular team or whether it's OpTic, there's no hand picking that. That's why I like that now. I know, they did have to do that in the past. Again, from a business standpoint on the tournament organizer side, it did make sense. Where it does suck on the integrity side, it does suck for OpTic. But it's kind of like not the price they paid, but it just sucks. It sucked for them to be that be used in that method and way. Again, I'm happy it's not like that really anymore. So yeah, we've grown. That's one of the areas we've kind of grown in, and we're in a better spot now for that. So I don't mind it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. All right, Omar, are we ready to go here? I'm going to bring up the stream on my screen so we can rank these flex players. If that's going to work, let's see if it works. If I bring it up here, then I should be able to see what we're doing, which would be cool. So I think we've got 12 flex players to rank, and you can help us in the chat here on YouTube and Twitch. If things are difficult to decide, then we won't have to kind of refer to that one. Okay, I see Selim already in the S tier. Love to see that. Yes, it is the case that Cell and RSTs, just touch on this real quick actually, Austin, like that they've kind of changed roles now, or that they probably already were in those roles anyway, to be honest, where Cell was using the AR more often, and now on maybe a map like Bocage, it's going to be RSTs pulling out the third SMG. But so far this season, he's been kind of considered a flex. We already voted for RCTs last week in the AR convo, so you kind of have to follow through and do Cell in this one, because otherwise Cell doesn't get to go anywhere.
So on the flex spot, like this is where I hate the term flex and everything, because the same thing I said with Kenny and Drazah last year. Like Kenny was the really aggressive player, but he was still the main AR. Drazah was the really slow player, like not really slow, but he was a slower paced player, but he was their flex because he would pull out the SMG. I mean, the game plan for our hard point, it was for MC to be using a sub on a couple of hills. Like there was a couple of hills across 3 maps that he was using a sub on. Granted, I think it's because he doesn't make as many highlight plays with SMG. Like his highlight plays are with AR. He still makes a lot of great plays with SMG, but like people just remember his AR plays. And in SMD, that we have some set plays that players switch different weapons. And Alec makes a lot of great aggressive plays. There's been a couple in Berlin. He almost made a sick 1v3 on Bocage with an SMG, but strategically, MC's always been our flex. It just changed after the major, where we wanted MC to be more comfortable with an AR, and Alec is playing. He understands how to play the SMG very well in this game, so it just made sense to kind of switch that over. But again, strategically, MC was our flex, even though he was the slower of the 2 ARs before this change.
Makes sense. Okay, here we go. I actually think this is really hard because there's a few players I'm looking at here, and I'm like, that's a solid A tier player, and that's a solid B tier player. But I don't know, like, okay, Cell's number 1, S tier, whatever. We don't really have to.
You just want to go from left to right. We'll just start with Illy and then keep going.
Yeah, okay, let's do that because I don't know who the hell's number 2 on this list. I really don't. Okay, Illy. I think I've been doing, I don't know if you do these as well, Austin, the power ranking list for Crone or whatever, MVP rankings. Yeah. To me, I think I had to just about drop Illy out of my top 10, but I think that in these lists there is always a degree of recency bias in that I think that Illy has actually been very impactful over the course of the year to OpTic success. Yes, he didn't have a great stage 2, had a poor major 2, but if you think about what he did in the grand finals against you guys to win it, like he had like the best series of his career. His comms are fantastic. He has these like flip a switch moments where he takes over a game. And where I place players here is always going to be biased to a degree by team success, because if the team's having success, they are contributing to that success. If the team isn't having success, it doesn't matter how well they're shooting straight, I care less, effectively. And the streak that OpTic went on, to me, I think Illy's an A-tier flex player. I think he does enough to be considered that way. Some might put him B, but I think over the course of the season, he's certainly in the A-tier. I don't know where he goes in the A-tier, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate if he was in B just on consistency levels. Like I feel like he He had a really rough major 2, but over the course of the whole season, I would still put him in the A. He was like he is OpTic's X factor. Like their MVP, I would argue, is Shotzi, but he's like the X factor. Whereas when he is playing well, like when he's playing better, this team can reach a higher like height. When he's kind of struggling, it kind of caps where they can go. So I would still I'm okay with him in A. Again, like when he's on his low, he's more like on the B tier, but I'll give him for like the entire season so far. He had a just such a good stage 1 that I can't argue with him being an A.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, here we go, baby. Kenny, let's go. I think, okay, does he deserve any higher than D? It's tough to say. He was actually quite good at the start of the year, but he's pretty much been shocking since then. And I know he talked about the fact that like he had to do a lot in the comms that was kind of affecting his play and where he was looking, right? Okay, we do have some stats here, which is nice to see. I don't know. Look, if Octane's D as we put him D, I feel like we have to put Kenny D. I don't want to put him D, but I feel like who else goes below him on this list? There's not many, if any.
Yeah, that's what's tough. Like I wouldn't hate to see him in C, but at the same time, I
We
don't
have a
think he's
few
a
tiers to play with, so
yeah, that's my thing. Like I don't think he's a D tier player. Like I don't want to say he's D tier, but I don't think he's been
he's been
consistently
performing at
better.
D tier level, and that's the thing. Like
Yeah,
he's definitely not a D tier player, but
he hasn't well, looking at the rest of the player pool, he hasn't played better consistently than any of those, what is that, 10 players? That's 9. Any of those other 9 players, he's not consistent. Maybe Cammy. Like I think him and Cammy
yeah.
have been like the
But
most.
Tim and Cammy are down there, and I feel like putting Kenny in a tier above Cammy is unfair on.
Okay, yeah, okay.
You know what I
I
mean? I feel like they
yeah.
should both be in the same tier. Like,
I guess
probably
we
it's
can
got
put
to
him
be
in
D,
D
right?
for
We've got a
now,
D tier. We could
and then
switch it
what?
up.
Then when we go through all 9 of the reigning ones, then we can try to play around with the tiers.
Yeah, okay. All right, chuck Cammy in there as well. To me, Cammy is slightly behind. Is he slightly behind Kenny? I think he is
I would
because
say he's slightly behind. Yeah.
I can't remember a single game where Cammy has actually done anything. Like, do you remember a single game where Cammy's like popped off? And because there's been a few series where Kenny's been like, okay, wow, that was nasty. Like, I can't remember, apart from maybe at the kickoff where Cammy got like 2 snipes in one round on Tuscan, and he made some good plays that event, but long time ago. Crazy to see Cammy here, right? Like, wow, I don't know why he's so bad at this game, to be honest. Like last year, I feel like at the end of last year, he was getting into overrated territory just because people all of a sudden started putting him like top 3 in the game. And it's like, we'll probably Selim deserved that on the course of the season. But he was, no doubt he was disgusting, like with all the different guns. There's no doubt. And he was such a key piece of their success with Kleenex, really. And now he's gone from being guaranteed top 5 player to just worst flex in the game. So tough scenes. I hope he gets back to it, but it's been tough. EU COD baby, you can't stay on top for long.
Yeah, I mean I would agree he's probably in D. Like right now, what's most concerning for me is he has a 0.75 in S&D. I really thought last year that was like his strongest game mode. That's where he had a lot of highlight plays. I just remember he had the 4-piece on Raid versus us where he was on top Laundry and just kind of like just one by one just got the picks. He's been doing okay in control, but yeah, he's like his hard point in S&D have been lacking. And that's why I do think him and Kenny are probably, I hate to say D tier, but they're on the like the lower tier out of this flex list, just because I think like I hold them at a higher standard because I expect them to be in like the A tier and the B tier, and their level of play isn't there, and their team achievements are not there as well. Like they've both been in really poor team situations as well, and I think that's what holds them back. Again, I think these guys have the potential, like both of them literally have the potential to be an A. I just think right now I hold them at a higher level of standard than some of these guys, and they just haven't been there yet. Even though I do realize they both can still contribute a lot, but I want to see more from them in the next couple of months stages.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do TJ. So, okay, I know you've had your bit of a back and forth with TJ over his career. Modern Warfare, TJ versus Easymac was good times. I don't know because I think Boston in general are slightly overrated. It might be a bit tough to say, and I might get bit in the ass for this one. But I think that their results, the first, especially this most recent major, just looking at who they played, it feels like whenever they play good teams, they kind of get handed to them. That's not always the case, but I think they're not as quite as good as the numbers look, let's just say. Now, having said that, TJ has been a very crucial piece of them actually being good. He was probably the question, not necessarily the biggest question mark, but everyone really had their thoughts about TJ just because the last 2 years he's been pretty lackluster, pretty bad to be perfectly honest. And this year he's looked good. So but does he deserve A tier? I don't think he does. I would say he's like B tier to me. He's been solid. He's done his job. He's contributing to their success for sure, which is a factor for consideration. But I don't think he's done enough for me to be considered like one of the best, especially given some of the other names that I think have done more. But you might disagree, Austin. Feel to
No,
be disagree with.
this is one of those players I want to put him in B for now, but I kind of want to go back through on the like after we like kind of like do the first round. Just because like I think he has been playing really well. I know like it's like go looking back at it, but I think he's like that Boston team's X factor. Whereas like he has a .94 for the season. He's been struggling in hard point, and I've seen him have some like stinkers in control, but he has just been so important in this team for his S&D, and I feel like that's really what's pulled them out of a lot of holes. Is like he's the only one on that team that has a positive opening duel record. He's 30-20 over the season. He's winning 60% of his opening duels. He's performing really well in it. He has a lot of damage. He does. He has a lot of clutches. He's been doing really well for this team. So I think, when you look at his respawn, he might slide into that C tier. I want to see how the rest of the tiers play out, but he's like a more I would say he's kind of like more of an underrated like C, maybe low tier B player right now. I think he has to grow a little bit more in hardpoint and he can be higher, but yeah, his S&D though has just been pretty stand out this year.
Okay, I think that's about right. I like that. Okay, Skies. He's been good. I mean, let me have a look at the stats here for Skies. Let's see what we're looking at. Okay, Skies is a 1.06. Solid stuff. I mean, obviously, Katie doesn't tell the whole story, but I think that's probably about what I would think of him. He's been really good on like all the weapons, actually. I think we've got to give him credit on the fact that, I mean, for a fairly long time, he held the kill record on the, what was it, Bakaj Hardpoint, right, when he had the sub in his hand. So you've got to respect that, right? Like a player who's able to do it with both guns deserves a lot of credit. Still, on my perspective, I don't think that it's kind of a TJ situation to me, where he's probably been better than TJ, at least statistically, but again, without the team being incredibly successful, I don't think he quite deserves that level. I mean, it's tough to say because when you look at the SMGs and stuff, you look at Awakening, like Dave Paddy. I think we put almost Dave Paddy in the B tier for ARs. I feel like that's kind of where the whole team is. They're kind of just like a B tier team, and then like that's basically just how it works. So for me, I think Skies is in B as well. I don't know whether I put him above or below TJ, to be honest. Probably above just because the performances. I don't think he quite deserves A. We might get back to that, but I think there's some other players I'd put above him.
Yeah, I agree with you. Right, because to put out some numbers there real quick, he has a positive KD in all three modes. He has a 1.02 in hardpoint. He has a 1.25 in S&D, and he has a where is it? He has a 1.06 in control. One thing that sticks out to me is he has one of the highest hill time per 10 minutes. He has 85 seconds of hill time per 10 minutes played in hardpoint. He's been kind of relegated to that hill bitch role. Like, what do they call it? Hill kitty? Like
Hill kitty nowadays, Hill kitty, yeah.
He's been playing that role. None of the other three players have a real high hill time per 10 minutes. They're actually really low. Skies is the only one that has that high level. So he's been relegated more to the objective role as the flex player. Like he's like, I feel like Awakening's like that star SMG. Dave Paddy's been a little bit more aggressive than they are. Vivid's very aggressive SMG player, and then Skies has been kind of relegated to the objective, but they can still lock it down, which again I don't hate. I don't know if that suits his play style perfectly, but that's the role he's been playing, and he's been doing it very well. I would say he has a 1.25 in S&D, which I think is really like clutch for that team. He's the only one with a positive KD over the course of the season in that mode. He has 115 ADR. He's been doing pretty dominant in that mode. So yeah, that's I would have him in B. I think he could be a fringe A player if he has another like standout mode in the next couple of like stages. If he can like pop off and control our hard point, he can get up there. But right now, I think he's a very solid B, like high tier B player right now.
I agree. Okay, let's do Spart. I'm gonna let you take over here because I led the first six, so you can now lead the latter six.
Okay.
Comes in for LAG. I mean, what do we think? He's obviously played great for the one event, but it's one event.
Yeah. See, he's the most difficult to judge.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I handed it to you.
Honestly, I think he's kind of I would say with
Yeah,
Illy
with
right
or
now.
without the bulk, that's funny.
I think he's with Illy right now until we get more data. Just because like obviously he came in and he won an event. Like I can't put him in B tier when he just won an event. He was a crucial part of that event. Um, his individual statistics aren't too flashy. He has a 0.99 over for that stage for that major. Obviously that was hampered by the OpTic match that he played, where I think he had a 0.5. So he probably
Yeah.
without that match has around like a 1.06, which is very good. Again, he has his pacing, his Slayer rating, which shows projected kills over a course of a series, is right there with Hook. He actually has he's basically the same number as Hook, which shows that his pacing is really good with Hook. It's really good, and he has a 1.18 in S&D. But the biggest factor he brought to that team, he's 22-5 in opening duels. He has won 81.5% of his opening duels, so I got to put him in A until proven otherwise. That might be a little bit overrated. He might be perfect. We need more data on him, but until proven otherwise, he's 1 for 1 for championship victories this season, and he's been performing very well on S&D. So I feel like it's safe to say like him and Inder could be on the same level right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It depends who else goes into the A tier. He's probably, well, it depends how we do the rest of the A tier, actually. I also do wonder if anyone's going to end up in C here. We might have to relegate TJ, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, I like Spot there for now. I think I was kind of conflicted on the whole slasher thing as well, but just because the reason why I put slasher B, not A, and I think people said he probably should have been A, but just because the whole season up to that point, I thought that's kind of where his level was. Whereas Sparta's pretty much just come in for the major and won the thing, and that's like all you've seen of him. So you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt. And he did play a lot of matches, to be fair. It's not like it's just a very small sample size, right? Okay, Attach next up. Attach has been their best player for Minnesota, but their results are terrible. So where does he go?
Yeah, that's what's tough because again, I look at his individual statistics. He's got a 1.08. He's positive in all three modes. 1.11 in S&D. 1.12 in control. I think individually he's been very well. But within the team, I don't know where to really put him. This is where I think like we're gonna have to probably make some very hard decisions in the B and C tier.
Yeah, we are, yeah.
Yeah, and I really hate man, this list sucks. I hate tier lists, man. I hate them so much. I This might be where Tej might get pushed in the C and like
I like you
attach.
think he does because the other players still to come, like there's a
Yeah,
lot
like
of B
I
tier players
rate
in there. There's
yeah,
a
I
lot of B
rate
tier players in
Gizmo and Paul and Temp and Sib higher.
there.
Where I
Yeah.
almost think like attach and Tej might be together in C. As hard as that is to see. Just because Attach has played well individually, but the team success is just not there. And I don't know how to weight a player's individual success at the cost of not winning. I don't know how to weight that correctly, especially in a tier
Yeah,
list.
it's so tough.
Because like it's the same thing with Temp. Like Temp has played individually very well. Very identical stats to Attach. Where do we put them? Do we ding them very harshly for not being a good team, or do we give them more stock for doing, good individually? That's where like I struggle with the tier list. And that's why it's very hard to make them. I don't know. I don't know how you see it.
I agree. I think it's tough when you have to consider these factors. Like the thing to me, I like the word that Fettuccino used in the chat here, which is impact. How much impact does the player have? And when the team isn't having success, you can't necessarily see that. Like the temp versus attach one is real interesting because to me, temp is without temp on that team, they would be absolutely nothing. Um, and he's been phenomenal for that team. And I honestly kind of agree on the attach point that like he's been good and his stats are good, but I feel like he isn't having all that much impact, to be perfectly honest. Like he's doing good numbers, but I never really. He's had some good maps here or there, but still, it's not really doing much for the team, from my perspective. And I
Yeah.
think looking at the other players and the seasons they've had so far, like people are going to put Gizmo in C. I feel like that's harsh on the whole because we have. I mean, this is the whole of the season so far for my POV. And yes, Gizmo was not good in stage two. But stage one, he was phenomenal. And I don't think that he's done enough to be dropped down to C tier yet. And I think that over the course of the year, he's done more than Attach and TJ have personally. Um, but maybe that's just UK bias. I don't know. But that's the thing. Like, I've got to put, at least for me, a player like Gizmo and probably Sib into the B tier, which means that guys like Attach are just going to get pushed down the rankings. Like, yes,
Yeah.
he might not deserve C, but he's probably like ninth
It's
or
almost like
10th
B minus
AR
and B
or
plus.
flex.
You
Yeah,
know what I
I
mean?
kind of agree. We could almost change it. Like maybe we can make C like B
A D
minus,
tier.
and then D becomes yeah,
See?
D becomes C. Yeah, do you
Because
want
it's
to do
like,
that, Omar? Can you change
yeah.
it?
Because it's so weird for me. Because like
Make D C and then B plus B minus.
I think we talked about this for the main ARs. Is there are so many main
But
ARs right
let's see. I
now
don't know if let's see.
that are just doing so much better, like so good, that it's kind of like changing how we look at like, usually flexes were like that star player, you know what I mean? And every like last year you looked at MC, you had Cammy, you had Dashy, you had like there were so many flex players that were this like S and A tier. Whereas this year it feels like there's a ton of main ARs that are like S and A tier. And then the flexes have been kind of inconsistent and more like just a lot of B tier. And I don't mean that like disrespectfully. It's kind of difficult to
Run of the mill, you
judge
know.
that, right? It's so different compared to years in the past. Um, so I think if we're
People are
gonna do
getting heated
Gizmo,
over Illy. Anyway, sorry, go on.
yeah, I mean that's what I mean. Like it's like, do you judge like how do you judge individual success and team success? Like because like Illy has not had the most individual success, but the team success he's one of two teams to win a championship this year. In this within the CDL points season. Him and Spart, which is why I have them in A, because I think their individual level is good enough to be B, but their team success brought them up to A. Whereas I think, you know, Dylan Attach has been good enough to be B, but his team success brings him down to B minus. And so I think Gizmo should be B. I think the only thing hurting him is I haven't seen the best LAN
Yeah,
statistics from him, and I
he's on the
don't.
verge of dropping into C or B minus on our
Yeah,
list for me.
and I actually think he's very good. He started off very hot in the season, but I also think he's kind of been struggling to get going on LAN, whether that's because of the team environment isn't perfect when they get there, or like whatever it is. Obviously, in Major One, he had a ton on his shoulders. I understand that completely, but I do want to see more from him when the chips are down. You know, when it's the most important matches. That's when I want to see just a little bit more from him, and he would literally be an A tier player. I think he's up there. So I think B probably I would put him above Skies is pretty safe to say for this one.
Yeah, I think that that's probably right in my opinion, just based on like results so far, because they are like still maybe not number three team now. I think I'd probably put LAG above them, but like London is still there or thereabouts until proven otherwise to me. As long as their practice improves, and yeah, he probably has underperformed in big games, but I think that he's done enough to deserve that kind of spot for now. I think what was interesting, the way that Octane described how he thinks about this, is he thinks in terms of who would I rather have on my team? That's kind of the question. At least in kind of current form so far this season. When you look down, like that's why to me Illy gets highly ranked here because Illy's a great player to have on your team. It doesn't matter like what his stats say or something. You know how important of a player he is with the championships and the success that he's had so far. So that's kind of where this kind of comes into play. But everyone's going to have their own opinion, so it is what it is.
Yeah, which is why I actually had Zinni and A in our main AR because I've actually like is seen, and I get to see a little bit more of that. And he has been a very good leader for them and captain. So that's why I actually gave him additional points in my flex or my main AR tier list and bumped him up. The same thing for Ilya. I think he's a very good leader for that team. Brings a lot of intangibles, and more importantly, he brings the best out of his teammates, which is very hard to do. And I think that you should be rewarded for that on these lists. It's not all about individual
Absolutely.
gun skill.
Agreed. I think it's nice. We got a bit of nuance, and it's actually quite nicely spread out our list right now. But the three players that this is tough to me. So Paul X, his record in the CDL is really good, and I think in terms of the whole like, which player would I rather have? You've got to give him a lot of credit in that because he came into London, did a great job with him in the 2 matches they played for the sub. Arguably, they looked better with him than they have done with Gizmo as of late. And then you've got to think that he comes into New York and immediately they go on a 6-game winning streak in Hardpoint, and actually make that team look good. As soon as he joins, the team actually flipped a switch. Now, you could argue if that was Crim to the many are or other things and factors, but still, Paul X has been very impactful for both the teams he's joined and was undefeated until the major. So he hasn't played that many series, but if we're gonna, Spart's played a fair few series and he got the A tier. He's definitely somewhere in B. I don't know what you think, Austin. I took the lead on that one. I didn't want to give it back to you.
No, you're good. You're good. I agree with you. I agree. This is one of those players that had a lot of individual and team. Like he has a good series win record. Obviously not the major, but I would have him in B, right in between Gizmo and Skies right now. Again, I feel like he's been very good in hardpoint in SMD. He just has to pick it up a little bit in control. And I think that was more of a team, issue within control, not per se just him. But if he can get just a little bit better in control, he would be very well rounded on all 3 game modes. I think it's very safe to say that B. But he's also another player where I want to see more from him because I think we've only seen a couple of series, not too many. I do want to see more from him. Same thing as Spart. I want to see whether he rises, whether if he can become that 3 game mode player, or whether he kind of stays or drops down to that B- tier with Dylan and TJ. But for now, I think it's pretty safe to say he's in the B sandwich right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he was great when he first came in, and then it does remind me a bit, I gotta say, of what happened to Paul last year, because he comes into London last season. He was really good for a time. Like, I don't know if you guys remember how many crazy games he had on Checkmate Control last year, where he would just go double positive and just win you the game. It was just absurd how good he was at that map briefly. And then it wasn't all that long after that point where Paul X kind of became a non-factor and kind of like a 0.95 type player. So hopefully that doesn't happen again for the New York team. But, it seems like when he was kind of fired up to get in the league, that's when he was like on full power, And then kind of since that's happened, he's kind of mellowed a little bit. But the success has been good, and I think he deserves B tier for now. I'd a valuable player on the team. I don't know how I can. Okay, I've put Attach in B-, and we've put Attach in B-. So now we've got to do Temp, right? And it's a similar situation with him on Paris. The success has been terrible, but what can you expect with the team they have? And individually, it's not just individually he's been great. I do think that he's doing a lot for that team in terms of comms, like upbeat attitudes. But then again, they're not having the success. And is there an element of playing for kills going on? Some people have implied it. So, what do we reckon?
I personally have him in B- above Attach, but below TJ. Just because I think TJ's had a more team success. But on the individual level, like comparing stats, Attach and Temp are actually very, very close. Across pretty much everything. But the big thing for me is Temp has just been a lot better in hardpoint. And that's something where he's kind of like willed his team. We've heard it in the comms a lot. He's been pulling a ton of impact out of his players. He's been leading the comms, leading everything. But again, that team isn't doing very well. I feel like if he was on a better team, we could potentially see him in like an A. I feel like again on an individual level, he is performing very, very well. But when taking this into account, team success and player success and season-long performance, I think it's unfair to put him with like Sib and Gizmo, when those players have been doing well and having more team success. That's the most difficult thing because obviously Temp doesn't have the same level of talent maybe around him. That's like something that's again, that's where tier lists, like, it's so hard to do, and there's so many like different ways to look at it, you know?
Yeah, I feel like Temp almost deserves better, but at the same time, I agree on it. If you're
Maybe
12,
put him at the beginning of B minus, like put him above TJ.
yeah, I think so because we've got to put Sib in B, I think,
Yeah.
and therefore like I don't think Temp can be much higher than that because otherwise the tier list loses meaning if there's like 5 or 6 in B. So we've got to separate it to a
This
degree,
is actually pretty like uniform right there.
and oh my god, it's stunning. Some would say. I think Sib goes in there, yeah. So look, you guys are going to say we're underrating Temp, but then we've still got Temp here as like what is it, the 7th best flex, which I think is actually pretty fair given the other players in the league here. And maybe Attach is getting underrated, but like I don't know if we're gonna punish Attach because his team's terrible, then we have to punish Temp as well for his team being terrible because at the end of the day, yes, Temp is having great impact for that squad, but they're still not winning series, so I kind of don't care. You know what I mean? I only care if you're actually good, to be honest. Now, not to say that if I was a team and a GM, I'm not looking at Temp being great for that team and getting them anywhere close to success and thinking he could be a great asset for me. But in terms of ranking that, you know, the best in the game from top to bottom, I think that this is probably a fair way to do it. If you're looking, you know, if you look at KD, it's going to look different, right? But we're trying to bring a bit more nuance here, and team success is going to factor into that. It's just the way it works. So I think that Temp, if anything, has been maybe he's been harshly done by, but I feel like all things considered, him being what is that 7th is not too bad. Okay, Sib. Weird debut season for me, this guy, because I was hoping he would tweet some more shit, to be honest, that he hasn't done, which has disappointed me. So, which is a little bit annoying. But it is what it is. He's been great at the start, and then he's been a little bit lackluster, but I think he's had his moments. So it's weird because Seattle, I think, are even they were a better team at that event than their placing suggested, given the max situation.
100%.
I think Sib, I think where Omar's going to put him for me is actually about right. I think he's probably bottom of the B tier to me. You might want to put him higher, Austin, which feel free to argue that. But I don't know if I've actually seen enough from him. I mean, let's have a look at the stats here, see what it says. It's probably not looking too bad. It's a 1.04, okay.
Yeah,
Pretty good
ready?
slayer rating as
I'll
well.
make it easier for you.
Oh, I like that.
Personally, I'm gonna argue that he should be at the front of B tier. Um, I think him and Gizmo are the clear-cut two people I see reaching into that A tier. If their consistency across, you know, everything improves. I think both of them have the weakness of S&D that they can improve upon. But right now, Sib beats Gizmo in KD, Slayer rating, adjusted KD, tests, which is the percentage of engagements that end positively, which is
All
either
the
kills or
stats.
assists. They have the same exact hard point, but Sib has more kills per 10 minutes, damage per 10 minutes, engagements per 10 minutes, non-traded kills per 10 minutes. You know, Gizmo beats them on most of them in S&D, but they're both lackluster in S&D. And then in control, Sib has a 1.1 in control, Gizmo is a 0.93. Sib has a better attacking and defending KD. He has more kills per 10 minutes. He has a lot more damage per 10 minutes. He has a lot more non-traded kills per 10 minutes. He has like his advanced stats are a lot better in the two respawn modes. And that team has had not the same level of team success as London, but I would argue that team should have had a much better result at that second major. They had one of the worst strokes of luck I think I've ever seen. It's up there with when Preston got sick for LA Thieves at that event, where they clearly should have placed better, but they just, you know, it sucks. And I think him and Pred. I mean, I think Max their best player, like underrated best player, but I think you know, Pred and Sib are like they take turns being that second star, and that's very important. And if one of them finds that consistency, they're going to be a walking star player, just like putting up great numbers every map. But right now, again, I have him at the top of B, but him and Gizmo, I do see one of them getting into the A tier pretty much after this next major if they keep performing at the level they are at times.
I like it. You know what? You brought the stats, you brought the receipts. I don't think I could disagree because at the end of the day, Gizmo is kind of an onliner right now, and Sib's actually done more on LAN. And I think probably I was being a bit harsh on him just because I was hoping he would I was hoping I could get him onto more thumbnails. You know what I'm saying? Hasn't happened yet, but there's still time, Sib, if you're listening. Okay, look at the beautiful symmetry, by the way. Can we just appreciate the symmetry? The only thing that would have changed is if we put temp in the S tier, and then all of a sudden we've got a beautiful, coherent unit. Look, there's some nuance involved here. I think there's a nice balance between individual performance and impact for the team. There we go. Look, I mean, well, that's an interesting shape that over. That's kind of that's
I
the
guess
one. That's the
one
switch over the
last thing
thumbnail.
too, because I see people like reacting to the no D tier. So the way I look at this, right, is a D tier player, not to make anyone like upset. Like you can go look at the stats and you can see the D tier players. There's some players that have really struggled across all stats and team success. The only reason why I would argue Kenny is not a D tier player and a C tier player, but not on the same level as those three above him, is because he has the same exact individual stats as they do, and that's with having a absolutely grueler of a stage two. He had a much better stage one, and I think his potential to do better is there. I think both of them are extremely underperforming compared to what we expect. But both of them actually have good individual statistics. Both of them actually had at least one good major cycle. Like Cammy and Co plays top four.
Maybe
What did
stats
Elliot?
actually aren't that bad. Like here's a
Yeah,
0.96. It's
both
actually
both of
not
them.
tragic, is it?
Yeah, both of them aren't that bad. Like they're not. Again, I'm not gonna throw names out there because I don't want to throw daggers, right? Like unnecessary daggers. But like there are some D tier statistics when you look at the overall sheet. And personally, I don't see those two in that category, especially when they did do a lot better in stage one, but just absolutely shit the bed in stage two. If that continues this next stage and at the pro-am, again, argument can be clearly made to be in the D tier. Obviously, Kenny will be running a different role, but if I guess for Cammy in that instance, but if they struggle in this next one, yes, D tier 100%. But I still have to wait having a good stage one against having a terrible stage two. That's kind of where that argument is.
I agree. I think we can leave it there. People are going to disagree, and that's absolutely fine. Look, we do have other players to consider here, right? Because we've got Drazah and Arcetes. I don't know if we won't necessarily want to place them. I feel like we could just talk about where we think they can be.
Okay.
But because I mean, we can if we want, but I feel like it ruins our beautiful list of kind of current flexes so far this year. Like, I don't know.
Just put
Arcetes, I think, has always
future.
been
Just put
great.
future for the player pool instead of that. Just put future, because then we can talk about them in the
Yeah, F
future.
for future. Exactly. That's the
There we
new
go.
F tier. I like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, future flexes come through. Arcetes definitely. I mean, we put in what? Well, you wanted to put him S tier. I wanted to put him A tier. Chat kind of said A tier. In the many
Yeah.
R's, I think he's going to be in a very similar position as a
Yeah.
flex. I actually think he's probably even better at that, which is kind of strange, but I just was so impressed at what he was doing in Modern Warfare with the MP5. Like, given kind of what his traditional role is, I just think he's so well suited to a role like that.
Yeah. This game, the playing the SMG role is very different. Because again, it's low TTK. You can't just bum rush at somebody and expect to like have that micro movement to out like gun people. Alec is just very smart on how he sees the game, and his positioning is elite, which is very important for an SMG in this game, and that's why he fits that role so good in this game. I would be okay with A. I think if we win a tournament, like if we can finally get over that hurdle, Alec would replace MC at the top. Honestly, I think like right now Alec is like he's really good. I can't wait to see him more on that flux role. Obviously, people have seen it in S&D. He like the first round that comes to my mind was the round 11 where on Berlin where he took the bomb and literally entered into sight, planted it, and then got 3 kills inside of I think it was B on Berlin and just absolutely put everyone in the blender to win us that match. Drazah, I think Drazah right now we could say B minus if he performs this. Like I feel like he actually had some underperformances on the SMG. I feel like he could be in that middle of the pack if he performs kind of how he did in Cold War. That's where I kind of saw him in Cold War, was kind of middle of the flex pack, like not superstar, but he didn't perform badly. He did his job very well. I feel like that could be the same kind of feel in this game. I feel like that's where I could see him fitting in.
I think that's probably fair enough. Okay, look, let's call it there. I think we've got a good list. I think the only thing I might think about changing is where Temp fits in. I feel like we might have partially done him, but
Yeah.
you know, look, at the end of the day, it's Paris Legion. So just by association with the organization, you find yourself in a bit of a tough spot. So there we have it. Thanks for all your comments in the chat. Thanks for all who've tuned in. I mean, look, we've streamed on YouTube to some great success, I think, and on Twitch as well. And it's been very active. I've had both chats up. I think there's a feature we can have in the future where we can have both chats like on the screen again. We want to do a graphics revamp soon as well. And yeah, final thoughts, Elston, before we close out the show?
Yeah, no, I mean, even though I hate the format of the Pro-Am, I'm actually super excited to have it still, because I think it's at least a foundation for probably one of the most exciting tournaments we can have in the future, if done right. I always love seeing, amateurs get a shot and then playing against them. A lot of these guys are ex-pros. I'm super excited to see how the Europeans do, just because I haven't seen, obviously we haven't had too many lands where amateurs go off against NA and EU and have a stream for that. So seeing how European amateurs do against pro teams and North American teams is going to be awesome. Really excited for that. So yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for Call of Duty to return. Feels like it's been forever already.
Yeah, damn right. Gonna need some more roster drama to keep me in the loop, to be honest, over the next couple of weeks.
Please, Call of Duty, do not put 2 1-month breaks ever again.
Yeah, can we not do
We're
this
2 weeks into this one. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. Can you imagine when we have another one in the month? In a month and a half, we're gonna have another 1-month break.
Yeah, like Lion's so bored. He's just slept for the last 3 weeks straight, and we can't get him up for the episodes. I blame the CDL. So it is what it is. Thanks all for watching. Catch us after the fact on all the streams, Spotify, Apple, if Tim Cook complies, all that type of stuff. Should be straight up on YouTube after this as well. Might have to crop it down or do some things to make sure that it's okay. And maybe we'll host someone on Twitch or raid someone, Omar, if you can find anyone. That'd be good. But thanks for watching as always. Take care of yourselves, and we shall see you next time.